Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going way back in time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, to explore what life was like in the U.S. before Europeans showed up.
Okay.
So if you're interested in learning about the indigenous cultures that thrived here thousands of years ago,
Right.
buckle up because we're going way back, long before 1492.
It is amazing how much history unfolded in this land
I know.
before Columbus even got here.
It's crazy. We always seem to focus on the colonial period and everything after, but there are so many stories waiting to be discovered in the pre-Columbian era.
Yeah, and it's mind-boggling
Oh, yeah.
to think about all the cultures that existed here.
I know over 500 distinct Native American groups,
Wow.
each with their own unique traditions and innovations.
And they came up with some amazing stuff, too.
It's true. Did you know some were the world's first copper workers?
Oh, wow.
And their agricultural practices were so advanced.
Really?
Yeah. We're talking about techniques that we're just now starting to rediscover today.
It really makes you think about what it means to be advanced, doesn't it?
For sure.
These cultures were developing sophisticated technologies and sustainable practices
Yeah.
long before modern civilizations even existed.
Exactly. Okay, let's start our journey
Okay.
with one of the oldest known cultures in North America, the Clovis people.
Right.
They were around from roughly 13,050 to 12,750 years ago.
So early.
I know. Imagine hunting mammoths with those beautifully crafted spear points.
Oh, yeah, those Clovis points are really something.
They are.
They're large, expertly flaked,
Yeah.
and often found near mammoth remains.
Oh, wow.
It gives us a glimpse into how they hunted.
Right, like holding a piece of history in your hand.
Exactly.
A connection to that time when megafauna roamed North America.
Yeah, it's like something right out of a movie.
But here's the thing. What happened to them? Did they just vanish?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
Archaeologists have been trying to figure that out for decades.
So what are the theories?
Well, some believe that the megafauna they relied on for food started to decline,
Okay.
which led to their demise.
Makes sense.
Others think they didn't completely vanish,
Okay.
but evolved into more localized groups.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Makes you realize how much we still don't know about the past.
I know, right?
But speaking of adaptation, let's head over to California.
Okay.
Turns out it was a hotspot even 12,000 years ago.
Oh, yeah. California was home to a big chunk of the pre-Columbian U.S. population.
How big are we talking?
Well, somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 people.
Wow.
And they weren't just nomadic hunter-gatherers either.
No.
They had settlements along the coast
Cool.
with tons of access to marine resources.
That is amazing. And those settlements go way back, too.
They do.
Like the one at Scotts Valley,
Yeah.
also known as the Carbonera Lake site,
Right.
shows people living there continuously for 12,000 years.
That's a long time.
And what's even more interesting is that they weren't just passively living off the land.
That's right.
They were shaping it with these practices that we would call forest gardening today.
Forest gardening.
Yeah, what's that?
Basically a sophisticated form of permaculture.
Oh, okay.
They would use controlled burns to clear undergrowth, selectively remove trees
Interesting.
to encourage the growth of plants they wanted.
Wow.
And it created this thriving ecosystem that provided them with a sustainable food source.
So they were like the original environmental engineers.
Yeah. It's incredible.
They really knew how to work with nature to create a thriving society.
Okay, are you ready for another mind-blowing discovery?
Hit me with it.
We're going to the Great Lakes region,
Right.
where we find evidence of some of the earliest metalworking in the world.
What?
About 8,500 years ago, people in the Great Lakes were crafting tools and weapons out of pure copper.
Seriously?
Yeah, could you imagine the skill it took to work with that back then?
That's incredible. So who were these master metalworkers?
They were part of a culture known as the Old Copper Complex, and they were living in a region with a lot of copper deposits.
Makes sense.
We found all kinds of copper artifacts.
Like what?
Spear points, axes, knives,
Right.
even decorative items.
Wow.
And one of the most amazing finds
Okay.
was a 10-centimeter pure copper spear point
Wow.
found near Lake Eagle, Wisconsin.
10-centimeter copper spear point. That's crazy. So they had this advanced technology,
Yeah.
but then they just abandoned it.
Seems that way.
Why would they give up such a valuable skill?
It's a mystery.
Is there a theory?
Well, some think that climate change might have been a factor
Mhm.
leading to shifts in resources
Yeah.
and the need to adapt to new materials.
Interesting. Makes you wonder what other stories those artifacts could tell.
Doesn't it?
That's like you want to go back in time and see it all for yourself. Okay, ready for another time jump?
Sure.
Let's go to New York City.
New York City.
Yeah.
Hard to picture Manhattan without skyscrapers.
I know, right?
But about 9,000 years ago, it was home to a thriving indigenous culture,
Ooh,
the Lenape people.
the Lenape. Were they just passing through?
No, they were rooted in that area,
Cool.
and their lifestyle was really advanced.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, there were skilled agriculturalists
Okay.
using a slash-and-burn technique to clear land for planting.
Wait, slash and burn agriculture in what is now New York City?
Yep.
That's fascinating. What else about their way of life?
Well, their location gave them easy access to lots of seafood,
Right.
so they could build larger and more permanent settlements than a
Wow.
lot of nomadic groups.
Interesting. Anything else?
Their social structure was interesting, too.
How so?
It's a matrilineal society.
What does that mean?
Lineage and inheritance were traced through the mother's side.
So women held positions of power.
Exactly.
That's pretty progressive for 9,000 years ago. What else do we know about their everyday lives?
Let me think. Oh, they had some unique hunting and fishing techniques.
What kind?
They did something called fish weir.
Fish weir.
Yeah, they would drive animals like deer into rivers so they could be caught easier.
Oh, that's clever.
And they used poison to stun fish, too.
Wow, they really knew how to use their environment to their advantage.
They did.
Sadly, we know that Europeans arriving had devastating consequences
Yeah,
for so many indigenous populations.
it's true.
So what happened to the Lenape?
Well, it's a story of resilience
Okay.
and adaptation.
Yeah,
But they faced displacement
of course.
and broken treaties.
Ugh,
They had to cede their land and relocate.
wow.
But despite those hardships, they persevered.
Yeah.
And they still exist today as a recognized tribe.
That's amazing.
It really is.
Their story really shows that history isn't just about the past,
No.
but also about the struggles of indigenous communities today. Speaking of amazing cultures, let's move to the Southwest,
Okay.
home of the ancestors of the modern Pueblo peoples, the Anasazi.
The Anasazi are famous for their architecture,
Oh, yeah.
particularly their cliff dwellings.
Right.
And no discussion about them would be complete without mentioning Cliff Palace in Mesa Verde National Park.
I've seen pictures of Cliff Palace.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Imagine building something that massive without modern tools.
It really is a testament to their skill and ingenuity.
It is.
They used sandstone blocks, wooden beams, and mortar
Wow.
to create these multi-story structures tucked into a huge alcove.
So cool.
It's the largest cliff dwelling in North America.
Wow.
Truly a marvel of ancient engineering.
It's hard to imagine how long it took to build something like that.
I know, right?
So what can you tell me about life inside those dwellings?
Well, picture walking through these small doorways.
Yeah.
You know, a reflection of how tall people were back then.
Makes sense?
And even though they're faded now,
Mm-hmm.
the decorations they made inside give us a glimpse into their culture
Right.
and their artistic practices.
They weren't just shelters.
Definitely not.
They were expressions of their culture and their connection to the land. So they built this incredible city, thrived for centuries, and then, poof, they vanished.
It seems like that.
What happened?
Well, around 1300 AD,
Okay.
they disappeared from Mesa Verde.
Hmm.
A lot of people think it was because of a mega drought,
Wow.
which would have made it impossible to farm and feed everyone.
It really shows the power of nature
Yeah.
and the challenges that even the most advanced civilizations face.
It does. Okay, before we run out of time, we need to talk about another major culture,
Okay, who?
the Mississippian civilization.
Mississippian civilization.
Yeah, they flourished from around 800 AD to 1600 AD.
Wow.
And their influence stretched across the eastern, midwestern, and southeastern United States.
Wow. That's huge.
It is, and they're known for their monumental architecture.
You mean those giant earthen mounds?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Some shaped like pyramids.
Yeah. What were they used for?
Lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
Religious ceremonies, burial sites,
Okay.
even platforms for elite residences.
Wow.
And their largest city,
Which was?
Cahokia, located in present-day Illinois,
Yeah.
was a major hub of activity,
Sounds like it.
with a population that may have even rivaled European cities at the time.
It's incredible to think about how vast their civilization was.
It really is.
So what do we know about their society and how they lived?
Well, they had a complex social structure,
Okay.
advanced agricultural techniques,
Hmm.
and extensive trade networks across a huge area.
Wow.
But one of the challenges in setting them is that they didn't have a written language.
Oh, right.
So a lot of their history has to be figured out from archaeological evidence.
It's like a giant puzzle with missing pieces.
It is.
So they were so widespread and advanced. Why haven't we heard more about them?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is. What happened to the Mississippians?
Well, their culture declined
Okay.
for reasons we're not totally sure about. But we do know that some of their descendants
Okay.
met Hernando de Soto in the 1540s,
Ah.
which means parts of their civilization were still around, even after their major cities had been abandoned.
It's fascinating to think about the connections between these ancient cultures and the people who live in these areas today.
It is.
We've covered so much ground already,
We have.
but there are two groups we can't leave out.
Okay.
Groups that are pretty famous in pop culture. The Comanche and the Apache.
Oh, yeah.
What makes their story so interesting?
Well, both groups lived in challenging environments
Right.
and played big roles in the history of the American West.
Okay.
The Comanche started as hunter-gatherers, but their story changed drastically
How so?
after the Spanish arrived
Would
and
you-
brought horses.
So they adopted the horse culture.
They did more than adopt it.
Really?
They mastered it,
Wow.
and they became powerful horsemen,
Okay.
controlling a huge territory,
What was it called?
Comancheria.
Elementary.
And they created trade networks all over the Great Plains.
That's not what you normally hear about the impact of European contacts.
I know, right?
So did their population grow because of horses?
In some ways, yeah.
Wow.
Their numbers grew after they started using horses,
Okay.
peaking around 1780.
Interesting.
They became fierce warriors
Yeah.
and traders,
Cool.
known for being independent and resisting assimilation.
That's a different side to the story than you usually hear.
Isn't it?
Okay, what about the Apache?
Well, they're often portrayed as fierce warriors
Yeah.
who fought back against Europeans trying to take over, and they had a good reason for that reputation.
Okay.
They have a long history in the Southwest,
How far back?
going back to at least 100 AD,
Wow.
and they were really adaptable.
Okay.
They lived in different types of dwellings depending on the environment.
Like what?
Tippis, Wickiups, and Hogans.
Wow.
They were like the ultimate survivalists.
What else about them?
They were really good hunters and gatherers,
Mm-hmm.
and they did some farming.
Interesting.
But their story is really about how they resisted Spanish rule
right.
and later Mexican rule.
Right.
They fought hard to protect their land and their way of life for centuries.
We've covered so much today.
We have.
From Clovis people hunting mammoths to the Apache defending their homeland.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think about all the different pre-Columbian cultures in the U.S.
It's like we've only just started to explore this huge history.
Totally.
Right.
Makes you wonder what American society would look like today, you know?
Yeah, it really does.
If these cultures hadn't been disrupted.
It's an interesting thought.
It highlights how important it is to understand the full scope of American history.
Absolutely.
Not just starting with Europeans showing up,
Right.
but going back thousands of years before that.
Yeah, like we've been looking at this map with a big blank spot,
I like that analogy.
and we're slowly filling in the details.
So as we think about all these incredible cultures, what really stands out to you?
You know, it's hard to pick just one thing,
Of course.
but I'm always amazed by their resilience and adaptability.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Clovis people dealing with climate change or the early Californians using fire to manage those ecosystems.
Right.
Or the old copper complex, figuring out metalworking so long ago.
It's incredible.
These cultures always found ways to overcome challenges.
And they did it without all the technology and resources we have today.
I know, it's amazing.
It really shows how ingenious they were
It does.
and how connected they were to the land.
Exactly. They weren't just surviving.
Right.
They were thriving.
Absolutely.
And they developed these sophisticated knowledge systems
Mm-hmm.
and sustainable practices that we can still learn from.
You know, it's kind of sad we've lost touch with a lot of those traditional ways
Yeah, it is.
of knowing and being in the world.
So what can we learn from these cultures? What are some key takeaways?
Yeah, what are some of the big lessons for you?
Well, I think one of the most important lessons
Okay,
is sustainability.
right.
These cultures lived in balance with their environments for centuries.
You did.
They knew that to survive, they needed healthy ecosystems.
And they were so good at managing those resources,
They were...
making sure their communities could thrive long term.
Exactly.
It's so different from how we do things now.
I know, right? We often focus on short-term gains
Yeah.
instead of thinking about the long term.
It's like we're disconnected from nature.
In a lot of ways we are.
And now we're starting to see the consequences.
Yeah, it's catching up to us.
Another important takeaway for me
Okay.
is the power of community and working together.
That's a big one.
A lot of these cultures had strong social structures
Definitely.
focused on cooperation and sharing.
They knew they were stronger together.
Yeah.
And their systems of government and decision-making reflected that.
It's a good reminder that we're not meant to do everything alone.
No.
We're social creatures
Yeah.
who need those communities, and we need to rediscover that power of collective action.
Especially if we want to tackle the big challenges we're facing today.
For sure. And we can't forget about their ingenuity and innovation.
Right. They were always coming up with new ideas.
I mean, think about those Clovis points.
Yeah.
And the Mississippian mounds.
It's credible.
They were always pushing the boundaries.
They were.
Of what was possible.
Yeah, and it reminds us that innovation doesn't always have to be about fancy technology.
Right.
Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best.
So true.
And these cultures show us how to use our knowledge of the natural world to create these really sustainable and resilient societies.
Okay, so what does all this mean for us today?
That's a good question.
Like, why should we care about the stories of these pre-Columbian cultures?
It's not just about learning dates and facts.
Right.
It's about understanding where our nation came from
Yeah.
and recognizing the people who were here long before us.
It's about understanding the real history of America.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And challenging those traditional narratives.
Absolutely.
Embracing a more complete and accurate view.
It's also about acknowledging the injustices they faced and learning from their resilience.
Right. They went through so much.
They did, and their legacy is still here today,
Yeah.
shaping our world in so many ways.
And by learning about the past,
Yeah.
we can understand the present better
Right?
and make smarter decisions about the future.
It's all connected.
The stories of these pre-Columbian cultures teach us so much.
About sustainability, community, and how everything is connected.
They do.
It reminds us that we're all part of something much bigger.
Absolutely.
And we have to take care of each other and this planet.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's like we've been given this whole new way to look at the world.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, as we wrap up this deep dive, what stands out to you the most? What about pre-Columbian life in the U.S. really sticks with you?
You know, it's hard to pick just one thing.
Yeah, I get it.
But I think what I find most amazing is how all these different cultures were able to thrive
Right.
in such a variety of environments.
Totally.
And a lot of them were really tough environments, too.
Yeah, they were. Think about those ancient copper workers.
Oh, yeah, up in the Great Lakes region.
Right.
And the early Californians.
Yeah.
Managing those whole coastal ecosystems.
That's so cool.
And, of course, the Anasazi.
Mm-hmm.
Building those amazing cliff dwellings in the Southwest.
Those are incredible.
It really says a lot about how adaptable and ingenious they were.
Yeah.
And their deep connection to nature.
It's true. It's like this giant mosaic of human ingenuity.
I like that.
Spread out across this huge continent.
It makes you think differently about the idea of progress, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
We tend to think of history as this straight line with Europeans arriving, and that's like the big turning point.
Right.
But all these cultures were making so much progress long before that.
Exactly. Like the Mississippian civilization.
Oh, yeah. Those mound-building cities
Right.
were just as big and complex as many European cities at the time.
It's crazy to think about.
And don't forget about the Lenape people.
Right here in New York.
I know. Who would have thought that Manhattan,
thousands of years ago, was home to this thriving culture.
and they had agriculture and fishing.
It's incredible.
It's like we're peeling back these layers of history, revealing all this richness and complexity.
That we usually miss.
It really makes you wonder, though,
Yeah.
what would America be like today if things had gone differently?
That's a good question.
You know, if those cultures hadn't been disrupted,
Right.
what would we have learned from them?
Yeah. What knowledge and traditions might we still have?
It's hard to even imagine.
But even though their stories haven't always been told,
Right.
their legacy is still here.
Yeah, in so many ways.
You can see it in our place names, our foods,
Yeah.
our art.
Even how we think about the environment.
It's everywhere.
It's a good reminder that history is all around us.
It really is.
It's part of our lives.
And the more we understand the past, the more we understand ourselves today.
Exactly. So by learning about all these different cultures,
We get a deeper appreciation for them.
absolutely.
Their resilience, their ingenuity, their connection to the land.
It enriches our understanding of this land
For sure.
and the history that came before us.
It's like we've been shown this hidden world
It's kind of like that.
full of so much complexity
Yeah.
and innovation.
And these rich cultural traditions.
And it leaves me feeling both inspired and responsible.
Yeah.
Like, what do we do with this knowledge now?
Good question.
How do we honor the legacy of all these amazing cultures?
Well, the great thing about knowledge
Okay.
is that it gives us power
Okay.
to make better decisions,
Yeah.
to question things, and to try to make a better future.
So it's about more than just looking back.
It is.
It's about moving forward with a better understanding
Right.
and a purpose.
And I think that's a good note to end on.
I agree. To our listeners, thank you for joining us
Yeah, thanks for listening.
on this journey through time.
I hope you learned something new.
And we hope it's made you want to learn even more
There's so much out there.
about the history of pre-Columbian America.
So much to explore.
So until next time,
Yeah.
keep those minds curious and those hearts open to the wonders of history.